Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands, and welcome to an SP Patrons video today that I'm making for Dinnerhe as part of their custom monthly music review. And if we switch over to here, we have ourselves a track on the screen from an act named Taylor Swift featuring Iver. This is titled Exile off of the Folklore album, art up on the screen, and we're going to listen through this track from start till finish, and we're going to hear what we think. Let's do this, let's go. What do we have?
I can see you standing, honey, with his arms around your body, laughing but the joke's not funny at all. And it took you 5 whole minutes to pack us up and leave me with it, holding all this love out here in the hall.
Phenomenal vocal timbre.
I think I've seen this film before, and I didn't like the ending. You're not my homeland anymore, so what am I defending now? You were my town, now I'm in exile seeing you out. I think I've seen this film before.
The fact that he can go into his mid-range like that, or his upper range there, and he's such a phenomenal vocal range. Great padding on the sides here as well.
I can see you staring, honey, like he's just your understudy, like you'd get your knuckles bloody for me. Second, third, and 100th chances, balancing on breaking branches. Those eyes add insult to injury. I think I've seen this film before.
With Taylor's own harmonies as well.
Like the ending, I'm not your problem anymore. So who am I offending now? You are my crown. Now I'm in exile, seeing you out. I think I've seen this film before, so I'm leaving out the side door.
So step right out. There is no amount of cry I can do for all this time. We always walked a very thin line. You didn't even hear me out. You never gave a warning sign. All this time, I never learned to read your mind. I couldn't turn things around, 'cause you never gave a warning sign.
Great to bring them all together.
Like the ending, you're not my homeland anymore. So what am I defending now? You were my town, now I'm in exile, seeing you out. I think I've seen this film before, so I'm leaving out the side door.
So step right out. There is no amount of crying I can do for all this time. We always walked a very thin line.
Great overdubs.
You didn't even hear me out. You never gave a warning sign. All this time, I never learned to read your mind. Couldn't turn things around, so now give a warning sign. You never gave a warning sign. I never learned to read your mind. Couldn't turn things around, so now give a warning sign.
Beautiful song. Genuinely gorgeous. Exquisite. Blown away by that. I love the combination. I don't think I've heard Iver or Bon Iver before. I'm not sure how to pronounce her name. So apologies if I am mispronouncing it. And we're going to talk about this track more in the conclusion. Because welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from an act named Taylor Swift featuring Bon Iver or Bon Iver titled Exile. Now, first of all, what do we think this track is about? I think this track is about a couple and the woman's left and she gave the guy a lot of chances. And the man does not understand what's happened. He doesn't understand why she's left. And they're just at this impasse. She's in exile, he's in exile, they're exiled from each other. Didn't work out, they packed up their things and left. And it's a terrible situation. It's about their different perspectives. And they're both very calm in retrospect. And they're very, very calm afterwards. But you could tell there were some heavy differences beforehand, and now they're just kind of going, you know, they're contradicting each other, I suppose, with their own perspectives. And it kind of shows, I think, a similar dynamic to I think a lot of people would probably have related to. Me myself personally, you know, like I think most people have been in situations where they've had to leave or someone else has left because of something, and it's terrible and sad. I think there'll be people that can relate to this, an audience for it. I mean, granted, it's Taylor Swift; she has an audience the size of the moon, so it's you know, it's a successful song. I think part of what works so well with this track are the vocal harmonies. It's not just that Bon Iver can sing really well. Fantastic texture and timbre in that lower range. A great way to start a piece from the male perspective as well, you know, like, which is interesting considering it's Taylor Swift's track and Bon Iver or Iver as a feature. To have them just come in first is a really interesting move, because then you get Taylor's perspective in the next verse. And you have the harmonies and the exploration of the stereo field from Bon Iver throughout that first 30 seconds to a minute, and it's very pleasant to listen to. And then you hear Taylor and it's like, oh, that's the other side of the coin. And as it builds, they show solid vocal technique. It's not this, they're singing and they're very comfortable in their ranges. Bon Iver goes between head, chest voice, and then up to a head voice and potentially a falsetto or at least a mixed voice. And Taylor kind of stays within her range for the most part really neatly. And I like the contrast between the textures, tones, and timbres between those parts, both when Taylor and Bon come together and when they are apart. It's very easy to listen to, very gentle, mesmerizing in its grace and beauty. And while it's a very sad story, they're very pleasant to listen to. I think part of the reason it's so pleasant to listen to is not just because it's sung very well in a way that I think expresses itself appropriately for the subject matter, but I mean, like, you've got that kind of piano accompaniment, that down, bum, and the piano plays notes that match the vocals. There's a unison with the notes there. I appreciate that, a clear chemistry and connection between the instruments and the sing parts. And you have the strings coming a bit more gently later on to provide a sort of to present a ground bed for the piano accompaniment and to show there's more than meets the eye. And you have the piano and the strings for a lot of it. Not all the time. They have their own moment. Each has a level playing field to sort of say their piece on. And things fluctuate. A lot of the attention is on the main focal leads, which are, again, Taylor and Bon. And they play off each other really neatly. And there's enough range vocally to be able to keep things at a point where you don't need to do much more instrumentally than that. There are variations in the way the strings are implemented there in the lower and mid ranges. And the keys, there are occasional accents, but they do have a personality and a scope of purpose along as an accompanying instrument. You can kind of get them singing a similar story, just again from two sides of the coin. And eventually you have very sort of subtle percussion where things sort of like ticking, like so dun 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 dun, with like a delay tail on it, almost like we don't want to commit to a full drum kit or anything like that. Because again, things are kind of floating in the ether in this piece. It's not meant to be a track that moves or grooves. You get that presence of the percussion alone, and you're like, oh, it's a ticking time bomb until they either realize why they've left or realize they don't want to be together anymore. And there's like a sort of a 16th note groove of pluxa pizzicato or something coming from the strings as well, which is a nice sort of like contrast from the bowed notes earlier. And it's just an easy way to sort of shake up a composition. And I mean, like, the track doesn't do a whole lot of development dynamically. It's just the scope and the positioning of the core ingredients that matter. There are these accents and harder notes on the keys that elevate a 1, 2, 3, 4 as we go through, which add a sense of sort of relative sense of pace to it. But rhythm is either quarters or eighths, so skipping along with what the vocals were doing. And I think instrumentally it's quite sound You know, excuse the quote. Structurally at 4 minutes 45, it's well fleshed out again with the understanding that the vocals are doing what they're doing, and instrumental parts are a ground bit or an increase in the awareness through the intensity of those parts and how they harmonize and layer on top of each other. And ultimately, it's more about like the atmosphere that's provided there. There's a lot of warmth, even with the minor triad orients and some of the earlier sort of like solo sections there, where we're trying to sort of like, it's a very bittersweet vibe there. And I think if you'd kind of been torn a nose with the minors or even added any sort of like harsher textures like this and then diminished, it would just be too much. We're trying to keep it relatively poppy and palatable. And maybe to sort of insinuate that we get growth and positivity through our ability to learn more from the environment we're in. But ultimately a very sort of like well-played minimalist piece that I think does reflect the subject matter well. Structurally, it works well and flows between the parts elegantly. You can figure out what's going on and there's moments to appreciate things. And the overall intensity in terms of loudness and the way things are staged makes sense. Thematically, again, I think the chord choices are fantastic. It's not too chaotic. It doesn't need to be. It's describing an atmosphere and an environment rather than trying to take you through a big journey. It's sort of unraveling the tale as you go across. So I think that the approach to the way we sort of did things here was sensible. I think we harmonize at the end on a 7th chord, which kind of infers a sense of, it's like a calm, relatively peaceful tone, but it's not fully resolved. Almost like we could potentially get back together, but that we're sad that we had to leave in the first place, despite the chance we're provided. It's just an interesting idea, like, there's subtle hints that things are far worse than imagined, and often you get that again from people afterwards. They're more gentle to be kind to themselves rather than to the other person, and they lie to themselves. But in the end, it's just the studio production, recording, mixing, and mastering. And so when we take into consideration everything we've had so far, we have vocals that are recorded wonderfully. Bon Iver and Taylor Swift sound fantastic within the mix. Great recording, quality EQ and compression is great. They're nice and they're not overproduced either, so it's not like you're having to sort of like color them or fix them in post. They can just both sing really well. There's dynamic range, so they're not too choked. Any string, key, or sort of like effects, percussive layers are put in there in a way where they're exactly the loudness they need to be. There is differences between the quiet and loud parts there. It's a very sort of like solid acoustic recording. And it sounds like you can kind of imagine people playing in the room, but like in a commercial standard. It's nice and loud without pumping, but it's not too loud. There's like a ceiling, but it's generous. And honestly, I think it showcases the best talents of both musicians involved as well as everything else. And it's just a really interesting song. I do like, as a final note, that Taylor Swift is able to match a certain approach that suits the subject matter in a way where a lot of her songs are kind of distinct, and I kind of dig the characterization of that. It's like they can put themselves in all these different personas despite the fact that a lot of her songs are about similar things. I suppose that just comes with the territory of being talented and also being experienced at this point in their career. But I think also it's worth noting at least half of that is simply being able to act if it's not something we can directly relate to, and being able to act with someone we might not necessarily have a romantic relationship and making it convincing through the chemistry. So ultimately, this is the review, my review of this track from an act named Taylor Swift featuring Bon Iver or Bon Iver, titled Exile, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please do go show them some love by their various social medias and their Spotify page. Apparently this track was a highlight off of the album from Dinnerhe, so hopefully it was for you too. And stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they need the help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I'll catch you in the next SP Patrons video. Spiderhands out.